What's up, y'all? This is Mike Manza with another Manza Faust Productions video, and today I'm gonna resurrect a series I haven't done in a minute, and this is probably the beginning of me doing this series a lot more often. In doing the research for this episode, it made me discover a lot of these bands have stuff on other labels that I also have a lot to say about, that I have a history with, and yeah, so it's really opened that door. So I got a big slate of stuff I want to get into, but yeah. So today I'm talking about and a little bit of a change. You know, the first two I did were Discord and Revelation, much more in that like kind of you could say straight edge hardcore kind of stuff, but early like to late '80s hardcore, the kind of formative kind of stuff. A lot of Youth Crew and positive hardcore coming out of that, but you also got a lot of like really fast like melodic stuff as well. Today I'm gonna change a little bit, but I feel like a lot of these bands take a lot of influence from, in particular, Discord. You have a lot of that like DC hardcore kind of sound. You also got a bit of a Boston kind of sound to it, but you also get a big amount of taken from the early like crust and stenchcore scenes, the more like East Coast like punk rock, fast anarcho kind of stuff like Aus-Rotten. Um, they even appear on this. You get a lot of that crust stuff that was coming out of places like Minneapolis at the time. Kind of a similar label to stuff like Profane Existence and Putrid Filth Conspiracy, Blackwater, places like that. So yeah, today I'm talking about Havoc Records, founded by Felix Havoc in, I believe, the early, maybe late 80s, early 90s. Let me get the exact date on this. Yeah, so like early 90s, I'd say. Uh, and this is founded by Felix Havoc, like I mentioned, who was a part of this band, Destroy. This is a classic 7-inch, Burn This Racist System Down, and I believe this is the first 7-inch release on the label. And this is some solid early 90s, 95, I believe, 92. This originally came out. This is a repress from the late 90s. But this is some solid early 90s crust punk. A little bit more on the anarcho kind of side. You got a lot of influence from like Doom and bands like that at the time. So yeah, solid. Not a lot on the inner, just the lyrics. Solid start, and you'll see throughout the time in this band, there's like bands, I mean, on this label, you'll see a lot of stuff coming out of Minneapolis and other parts of the Midwest, other parts of Minnesota. We got a couple of other bands coming out of like St. Paul. You get a fair amount of Swedish bands. You get some bands from the East Coast. Still, you know, a bunch of different types of stuff, and it really is cool to see the kind of influences that they all take from. And then like later on, as time went on, Havoc got more into like reissuing a lot of stuff that was like big like influence. So a lot of stuff coming out of Finland and Sweden, probably some like early D-beat and crust stuff. I remember, I'm not going to talk about a lot of those because that was like, they're not, I kind of want to stick to like stuff that Havoc originally released and stuff that's associated with them. And I feel like reissues, that's stuff that would come up in another video talking about those particular labels. So And I got a ton of releases anyway, so I don't really want to make this longer than it needs to be. So yeah, you got that Destroy 7-inch, solid stuff. And at the same time, you got another big band. I've talked about these guys before. You got Aus-Rotten out of Pittsburgh with their Fuck Nazi Sympathy 7-inch. And this is like iconic, like 90s anarcho, fast punk rock, a little bit of street punk in there. Just great band. They would release a lot of different stuff on different labels. But this is like a lot of people's, like, when they think of this band, they think of this EP, especially that cover. Very famous, like, you know, back patch kind of image and stuff. And it's really solid stuff. I love Tuesday, May 18th, 1993, and the song AIDS is really great on this. Just like very like vicious, urgent, potent, political anarcho-punk rock. Just relentless. The dual vocals work very well with it. And you got members of this band going off and forming other bands that would release through Havoc later on. So this is a classic EP. If you have not heard Fuck Nazi Sympathy by Aus-Rotten, definitely check that out. Okay, so all right. So next up, we got Code 13. This is a band from, I believe these guys are from Minneapolis. You got Felix Havoc on vocals, so another Felix Havoc related project. This is a lot more like kind of street punk mixed with a little bit of like early hardcore, so you'll get like elements of like Negative Approach and Poison Idea on this, but it's a lot more in that like street punk kind of thing that was happening in the early 90s. You know, the stuff later on, like this holds a lot more with like Defiance and Virus, those more like kind of melodic kind of street punk bands, not so much in the vein of like the Unseen and the Casualties, a lot of that kind of like Mohican kind of stuff happening at the time. But you definitely hear quite a bit of you know, thrashiness to this as well. You got a lot of influence from those kind of later era exploited albums when they got a little bit more of a thrash metal vibe to it. But this is a solid 7-inch. Code 13 put out a lot through this label. I love this center label. Some really great splits, and split with a band that really became quite a huge deal for Havoc, and actually was like one of the big bands to lead to that kind of what they call bandana thrash revival kind of thing, with bands like Municipal Waste, to Crucial Unit. This is much more on the thrashcore side of things, so this has a little bit more of a footing in hardcore. You got a lot of vibes of like Boston and DC hardcore on this, but they're coming out of Sweden, so you also got that element of like Mob 47 and Shit Lickers, a lot of those early Moderate Liquidation, a lot of those early great Swedish bands, taking a little bit from D-Beat, but also taking a fair amount from the emerging kind of thrash scene going on. And that is DS13 with Killed by the Kids. This is from 2001, I believe. And this is just a ripper. And DS13 did a couple of splits on the label, most importantly with Code 13. solid 7-inch. I didn't pull it because I wanted to keep each band to like one release throughout this. But this is a killer fucking record, and I visited a lot of these last night and this morning, just because I hadn't listened to a lot of these in a really long time. You know, I got these like 20 years ago, so some of them. So like, you know, I had to introduce myself to a lot of them, and they hold up great. And this is a lot of fun. You get a lot of SSD control kind of vibes off of this. You get a lot of you got some Jerry's Kids vibes, a little bit of Scream and that DC kind of thing, like Government Issue and stuff like that. But you also got a fair amount of like the thrashier kind of stuff, DRI, early Suicidal stuff coming out of California, and you know, early Black Flag. You hear a lot of on this. So there's a lot of different stuff going on, and these guys would be very important in that kind of thrash revival later on that would come out in like the mid 2000s. And yeah, so DS13, really great album. So next up, one that I've discussed quite a bit on this channel already, especially in my early purchases, you know, records that got me into, you know, record collecting early on, and, you know, deeper into the punk rock kind of stuff. This is The Murderers. This is a band from, I believe, Minnesota as well. I can't remember the, they didn't, I gotta look this up actually. Got this nice Skull and Crossbones center label. You got nice fold out poster, you know, sort of like a Crass style kind of thing, but this is a lot more on the sort of scum. Yeah, so Minnesota. Another band. So yeah, this is a lot more on that like kind of sleazy scum punk kind of thing. So you got some like, you know, early G.G. Allen kind of influences, but a little bit more thrashier, little you got yeah, it's just like scummy, sleazy, got a bit of a street punk kind of vibe, but a lot more noisier, chaotic, like fucking abrasive vocals. Just it's great. It just thrashes. It's not like a lot really to say about it. It's pretty you know, lyrics haven't aged the best. It's kind of just stupid, you know, typical nihilistic punk rock lyrics and stuff, but yeah, definitely a solid 7-inch from the early releases. Next up, this is one that I've had for a very long time, and I couldn't remember what this band sounded like. But yeah, I'm trying to real quick remind myself where these guys are from. So this is a band from Wisconsin, and they would later on form Weaving the Death Bag. I'm not really familiar with that band, but this is USV, United Supervillains, their EP, The Escapist. I like this center label. Got down this nice, like, kind of purple, pinkish color vinyl. And this, I got a fair amount of kind of Charles Bronson from this. The vocals definitely remind me very much of Mark McCoy. It's much more in like the thrash core kind of vibe, though I wouldn't call this like power violence. It's definitely continuing in that kind of skate punk thrash core kind of thing that was really big at the time. But yeah, just fast, aggressive kind of stuff. Definitely a little bit of like power violence influence in the vocal delivery, but I wouldn't say that they were a power violence band in the slightest. Just very standard kind of hardcore thrash metal, thrashcore kind of elements to it. Yeah, very fun. And that's another band. They released a couple of, I believe they have one on Deranged, so they'll come up. I want to do an episode on Deranged. I got a ton of those. So when I do an episode on that, you'll hear about their LP, which I gotta revisit as well. Up next, we got a split between Holding On and The Real Enemy, and these are much more on that kind of like positive hardcore youth crew, but like thrashier style kind of things. So what you would get with I'm trying to think what were some of the bands. There was a lot of these early on in the 2000s. I believe this is from '99. Yeah. So these guys are kind of early to it, but you get, it's just some solid, you know, youth crew inspired kind of stuff. You know, you get a solid amount of you know, Youth of Today influence, but you also, it's more solidly in that Boston kind of hardcore, so SSD and DYS kind of stuff. A little bit of Gangrene. And 7 Seconds. There's like a couple of releases I'm going to talk about that have like a very heavy 7 Seconds kind of vibe to them. The kind of melodic sing-along kind of stuff definitely brings that back. So yeah, and these are both like Twin Cities based bands. Up next, another band that's just like all over the place from New Jersey. Again, this band would release on like all the different labels and Tear It Up. This is a great 7-inch, man. I love this band. I feel like they don't get talked about a lot these days. But man, these guys were on fire for a while, just releasing a lot of great releases, great stuff back in the day. You know, you got like I've been saying with a lot of these, you got a very thrashy kind of vibe to this. This goes a lot more in the kind of Black Flag, Suicidal Tendencies, very West Coast kind of vibes. Yeah, pretty solid stuff. Tear It Up. Love their stuff, man. They have a lot of different releases, so that would definitely be one for a spot of artist spotlight in the future once I get more of their stuff. Another LP. Actually, we're not quite there yet. So, pulling. This is a band I had to revisit. This is quite a few of these. When you would order 7 inches from him, he would just send you like kind of doubles of a lot of things. So I have a few copies of this one. And just to get the location of this band, they are from. I can't seem to place it. But yeah, Spitting Teeth. Great throwback Bush era kind of cover there. They're a United States band. I just can't figure out where from. More thrash. This has a lot of that like 7 Seconds vibes to it, but it's definitely more of a thrash core kind of record. Early stuff. You know, just revisited this one today, so I can't say too much about it, but it's pretty solid. Fast, aggressive kind of stuff. I don't think they have many other releases either. It looks like it's just a couple of them. So. Another one that used to always get in the packages and stuff. This is another band from Minnesota. I'm trying to see if Felix had a place, a part in this. Nah. But yeah, Path of Destruction is a pretty solid, just raging. This is a lot more in like the hardcore negative approach kind of vibe. Quite a bit of Poison Idea as well, so really fun. This is another one, like he used to always send me like multiple copies of this because I used to always order 7 inches. And when you mail ordered 7 inches, just sent you a bunch of free stuff. So you ended up with like 20 copies of some of these. I got rid of a bunch of them, but still have like 2 or 3. Pretty good. And then another one that just ended up in the package quite a bit. Just reminder of. So this is a band from St. Paul, Minnesota. This is Any Last Words. Pretty solid release. More thrashy, hardcore, very much in the vein of West Coast kind of stuff. You got a very heavy amount of straight edge vibes. So, yeah, another one, you know, I get a lot of copies of back in the day, but pretty solid stuff. Okay, so getting into some LPs now. I'm not really going completely chronologically. Some of this is going to jump around. I did the best I could, but Wolfbrigade from Sweden. This is DB Odyssey. Just fucking incredible. This is like an EP. It's only like 5 or 6 songs, but man, this is like some of their best material. Their other previous band, Wolfpack, New Down Fades, is probably my favorite material from them, but this is some solid stuff, and considering it came out like around 2006, I believe, 2005, this is like how D-Beat should sound, because there was quite a bit of stuff. One of them I'm going to talk about next. There was quite a bit of stuff that was a little bit overproduced. You had like, you know, this crust stuff was becoming a lot. You had arena crust coming up, which a lot of that stuff I love. Tragedy, stuff that came out of His Hero Was Gone and stuff. But Wolfbrigade just had that, you know, classic kind of D-Beat style, definitely taking a lot of influence from, you know, like Discard and the classic kind of stuff. It hadn't become like this real like metallicized kind of thing like Dysphere was doing around at the time. I wasn't as big on those later Dysphere records. You had like this kind of, they went a little bit more in that arena crust area, so like just very large sounding records, you know, big time, at least for this kind of music, big time producers at the time. Just like there was a lot of this stuff happening at the time, and like this just stood out. Just great songwriting, catchy fucking riffage, abrasive vocals, like everything you want from like classic Swedish D-Beat. Just modernized quite a bit, and yeah, real solid release. This is like probably one of my favorite of the 2000s D-Beat stuff. Yeah. So, band that grew out of the ashes of Aus-Rotten, and also featured members of a few other bands at the time. Caustic Christ, this is their second LP, Lycanthropy. I kind of prefer this one. The first one's really good too. Much more of like a My War side A, Black Flag kind of vibes to that one. This one, you know, you get a lot of that kind of Pittsburgh kind of sound that was big at the time. So this is a little less on the you know, anarcho-punk, street punk kind of sound of a lot of that Aus-Rotten kind of stuff. The other band that grew out of Aus-Rotten, Behind Enemy Lines, has a lot more like kind of invested in that sort of like East Coast crust, thrashy kind of vibe. This is a lot more straight up, just like Poison Idea, Negative Approach, a lot of West Coast kind of vibes, maybe like early kind of Battalion of Saints kind of stuff. Really, really solid. You know, you got the riffage still kind of reminds me of a lot of that Black Flag kind of stuff. This is a little bit more on like the kind of earlier sort of stuff. So like Damaged and maybe even the Des Cadena on vocals era kind of stuff. So yeah, really good thrashy kind of stuff. And if you like Aus-Rotten, really great. This also features has a lot of bands of that time do. Bill Chamberlain from The Pist and a bunch of other bands. I believe he was in charge of the Eugene Records label, which down the line I want to do an episode on that. I just have a couple of releases I want to get for that one. But solid release. And if you want to pick up their first LP, that's really good too. And a lot of 7 inches and stuff they would put out are solid as well. The last LP I'll talk about, and I got a couple more 7 inches to show off, is Skitsystem. Swedish kind of 90s crust legends. Got this nice like little fold out poster. I'm not as big on this record as some of their earlier stuff. This is definitely showing a bit of the higher production value. The members of this band would also, a few of them, I can't remember which members of this band, but a few of them are in At the Gates, which is a huge influential band on that kind of metalcore kind of sound, and later on more of that like mallcore kind of. I'm not really into At the Gates at all. I've never really been a fan of them. Tried so many times, just can't get into it. So this is a lot more on that like crust punk, like D-beat kind of side of things. But I don't know, something about it doesn't stack up to their previous LPs, which I think are fantastic. This one's not bad, but you know, could be better. It struggles from a bit of that like early 2000s kind of D-beat sound that a lot of bands were adopting. Just a little bit too big sounding for my taste. I like it a little bit more raw and chaotic, but it's still solid, still pretty good. If you like their earlier stuff, I'd definitely still check it out. Okay, so a couple more. This is so if you've been watching my channel, you know this band. Riistetyt. You know, fucking legendary Finnish band. And at the time, Havoc was reissuing a ton of their stuff. And they had some newer stuff coming out through Fight, and then that stuff would make it over onto Havoc as well, through distribution, and a couple of their 90s 7 inches would get repressed as well. Solid release though. These guys never really stopped killing it. Yeah, this is, you know, they were going more in that like kind of more like kind of later era Finnish stuff. Like this, I would definitely say sounds more like Chaos's Ismit, which is a great album, but it's a different kind of sound. These guys have a little bit more of like a biker kind of like tone to the guitars. The vocals are not as chaotic. They're more of like a crusty kind of shout. Very comparable to like, you know, that kind of West Coast sound we were getting in the 80s. More than, you know, kind of the chaotic, you know, early Finnish stuff you would get from Tevi Cadet and Chaos. But yeah, solid 7-inch. And the last one I'm going to talk about, again, gotta remember where these guys are from. I believe they're Swedish, but I don't want to get it wrong. Yeah, so another band from Sweden, and this is definitely a standout. These guys are a lot more in that like garage rock, just straight up like rock and roll style punk. They were on everything as well back in the day. Really solid. Regulations with Different Needs EP. It's fun, you know, anthemic garage style punk rock. Real like raw, but in a different kind of way. It's not as like lo-fi and noisy as a lot of these other bands, you know, just like anthemic, great sing-along potential kind of stuff. Yeah, you got a lot of this stuff coming out of Sweden. I feel like this is more in line with like Ostykask and that more like kind of melodic, street punky kind of stuff, but with a garage rock kind of vibe. These guys like definitely fit in with that. I think it was called like Burning Heart or something, but they were like a subsidiary of Epitaph over in Sweden, and they had a lot of these kind of bands. Famously like Millencolin, but that's a little bit more on like the skate, like pop punk kind of vibe. But yeah, if you haven't heard Regulations, this is a great like throwback to that time period. Like this band was everywhere. Yeah, fucking awesome. And yeah, so that's Havoc. Kind of threw this one together a little haphazardly. A lot of these I still gotta revisit fully. But I wanted to discuss it because this was definitely like one of those early labels for me that was very important. Finding out a lot about like these different kinds of sounds. First getting into hardcore, it was very cool. You know, learning about different regions of the world, Sweden, Finland, maybe some Japanese stuff in there as well, at least in the influence that these bands were taken from. There was some Netherlands bands on the label as well, and just like a solid amount of releases. Then later on, when they started doing more like reissues, they started putting out like reissues of Discharge and the Riistetyt kind of stuff. They did some Chaos, all those kind of classic records. It was giving, you know, a lot of us the opportunity to hear that stuff. You know, kind of introduce us to the kind of legendary stuff. Temperi SS. I remember when they were releasing a lot of that stuff that was related to the Hardcore 83 compilation. That I was all about. And yeah, like I said, you have these connected labels. You got Fight Records out in Finland. You got the connections to Hone out of, I believe that's a German label. I can't remember. They were putting out a ton of that classic like propaganda stuff from the early Finnish scene. You got a lot of these bands were also on like Profane Existence. Holding On has a couple of releases on Bridge 9. Yeah, so you got like a lot of different kinds of sounds coming off of here, but you know, very good at promoting that good like early thrash, like crossover revival kind of stuff, but also, you know, great like youth crew, fast, like straight edge kind of stuff, and crust. You have a fair amount of great like crust punk, anarcho punk stuff coming off of this label as well. So you really get like the kind of different places that you know, have Felix and all the other people involved were really grabbing at that time. And a lot of these kind of scenes would blossom throughout the next few years for these releases. So very cool. Yeah, if you got any other Havoc releases that you're a fan of, and some important stuff that I don't own and couldn't get to in this video, put them down in the description. If there's like any records I talked about in here you have a different take on, you don't like the record, or you think I didn't give it enough praise, let's get into that as well. Like and subscribe. Doing great on subscribers lately. Like, I saw real uptake ever since my video on Barely Breathing in 2 up in Long Island. Very happy with how those videos came out. And yeah, I'm just having a great time doing these, and I want to do more of these kind of label focused episodes. I got some more like Victory I've been wanting to do for a while. Tons of labels that I feel like really formed my interest in a lot of this kind of stuff and were very important to me growing up. That's kind of the focus of this series. Down the line, want to do that one on Eugene Records. Like I said, I got to get a couple more titles, because like that's the type of label, it was such like a short run that I want to have like their entire output, and then I can really go into a lot of that. And I've also wanted to reach out to a couple of people that I know personally that had part in bands released on that label. So yeah. So if you want to follow me on social media, I am the Hordes of Manzerfaust on Instagram. And again, sorry this is late. Wanted to take a little bit more time in digging into these, just refamiliarizing myself with some of these titles I hadn't pulled out in a while. And yeah, so yeah, hope you enjoy it. And like I said, there's more on the way, and I got a couple of more, you know, the Blu-ray movie related stuff coming up as well. That never stops. It seems to be like taking over my channel a bit more than I'd like it to, but I do love talking about that stuff as well. So, you know, kind of balance a bunch of different stuff. So yeah, that'll about do it. My name's Mike Manzer. This has been another Manzerfaust Productions video. Stay fucking metal.